So hello Mr. Lin, my name is Wilson.
And my name is Hermawan.
So today we are going to give the presentations about Brexit and why it is important to us. So to briefly introduce our presentations, Brexit is really a theme these past 3 years as a hot topic that economists and politicians keep discussing about. So after doing our analysis and research, we finally found a lot of interesting facts about Brexit. So without further ado, let's jump into our presentations. So there are two main questions, which the first one is, what is Brexit? The second one is Brexit important to us and why? To understand the first question, we really need to understand the background itself first. Brexit means that the Britain going to leave the EU, and we're going to start with the European Union. European Union itself is an economic and political organization that consists of 28 European countries such as Germany, France, Sweden, Croatia, and etc. So what is the main reasons that the European Union was built in the first place? Actually, the reasons was to create an economic cooperation between the European nations and to avoid wars that are going to happen amongst the European countries. Now, the European unions have regulated a lot of things to their member, as one of them is using euro as their main currency. So as we all know that the European countries, almost all of them have their own currency, but if they're registered as the European Union's member, they really need to put euros before their national currency. So every country in the European Union will mainly use the euro currency. So to understand another background, what is Brexit? As I have said previously, Brexit itself comes from the abbreviations of the Britain exit, or it's the literal meaning that the UK will leave the European Union. So why is UK leaving the European Union? There was a referendum on the 23rd June 2016, where at that time 30 million people voted, which result in 71.8% from the whole populations of the UK. And this vote resulted in 51.9% of the citizens agree for the UK to leave the European Union. On the other hand, 48.1% voted that the UK needs to stay in the European Union. So when will the UK leave? Actually, the first date was set is 29 March 2019, but at this time there were no agreement that can satisfy both parties. So they really need to extend the date to make it into 12 April 2019. But at this date, once again, both parties cannot be satisfied. They cannot meet an agreement that really agreed by both sides. So the next date is 31st October 2019. This is being said that this is going to be the final date and the last date for the UK to decide whether they leave the EU with agreement or not. So according to the David Cameron, the British Prime Minister, people that voted why they want to stay, or David Cameron himself have voted to stay, is mainly because of the economic reason. The first one is 45% of the UK's export goes to the European Union's countries. The next one is the uncertainty in financial market investment. The UK feels like if they stay, they will avoid this risk. That's why they want to stay, because they want to avoid the risk of uncertainty that happens in the financial market investment. As for the reasons why people want to leave, the first one is, as I have said previously, that European integration is too hard to accomplish. As European unions having several standards that their registered members needs to fulfill, the UK feels like this regulations is too hard. As for example, which leads us to the second reasons, which is say no to euro. As I have said in the previous slides, that euro needs to be set as the main currency for the registered member of the European Union. The UK feels like their pound sterling is one of the greatest currency in the world right now, they feel like using euro doesn't make any sense. That's why this holds as one of the biggest reasons why the British wants to leave the EU. And last but not least is the surge of immigrations. As the EU have set a lot of standards, this might be one of the regulations that's set by the European Union. As other European Union countries have their immigrations, the UK feels like the surge of immigration is too much for their country. Next one is the withdrawal agreement. So the withdrawal agreement is like the agreement that needs to be fulfilled by the British side before they leave the European Union. The first one is the payment. The British side needs to pay 39 billion euros for their divorce bill to separate the UK from the European Union. The next one is the citizens. They really need to look out for the citizens of the UK that lives in the European Union. And this happens vice versa for the European Union's citizens that lives in the UK as well. Next is the transition period. The transition period is the period where the UK will leave the EU's, and what will happen to the trade that have been dealt between the UK and the European Union itself, and the time for both sides to adjust businesses. Last but not least is the backstop. The backstop is the physical border between the Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland.
So next I will explain about the breaking news that happened recently, where Theresa May said that she will resign from her position on June 7th. So they need to find their new leader to solve the Brexit issue. So what now for the Brexit issue? There are 7 solutions that they could come up with. The first one would be return of the existing deal. So the new leader and the European Union could actually reach the solution where they use the deal from Theresa May herself that she gave previously. The second one would be no deal Brexit. If, for example, the MPs cannot agree on anything else and they don't want to give further extensions. And then the third one would be major renegotiation. So both sides could actually renegotiate for new deals, new agreements, so that both sides could actually agree upon. The fourth one would be another referendum. The famous one would be the confirmatory vote, where they give the public to vote whether they want to stay on the EU or not. The fifth one would be calling a general election in 2022. And the sixth one would be another no confidence vote by the government. And the seventh would be no Brexit, which means that UK will revoke the Article 50 and they will cancel the Brexit. So the second question would be, why is it important to us and why? So as an international business student and the citizens of the world, this issue of course will affect us. Moreover, UK is the 5th biggest country in the world. So there are both the positive sides and the negative sides of this issue. The first one would be the positive sides or the advantages of Brexit. There are 3 advantages that we could come up with. The first one would be flexible trade, export and import activities. Since the UK already exit EU, now they could come up with new policies so that they could have their own ways on dealing with the trade, export and also import activities. The second one would be freedom in creating policies. It means that, as I said earlier, they now are not bound by the European Union rules, so that they could have their own way on dealing certain things. And also, it could be good for some of them that was harmed previously by the EU policy. And the third one would be the immigration status. As we know that Britain actually want to exit EU primarily because they want to lower down the immigration level. So of course it will give back the jobs back to Britain citizens. since the immigrations are lowered down. The disadvantage of Brexit, there are 4 disadvantages of Brexit that we could come up with. The first one will be market uncertainty. It means that even though it's in a way it's good for us since we have our own freedom to deal with certain things, but now for some time, of course, they will have to adjust, and it will create the uncertainty and unstable economy for UK, which is the 5th biggest national economy in the world, and of course will affect the rest of the world. The second one will be decrease in investment and job opportunities. This means that it will degenerate the trust of worthiness among the global traders and investors towards the nation itself. And the third one will be the low financial center status, where it means that UK will hard to enter the market of EU since they already exit the EU and they don't have any more privilege from the European Union. And the last but not least will be trade scale shrink, which means that they don't have the single market anymore since they already exit EU, and it of course would have to adjust with certain things. So now I will end this presentation with a quote by David Cameron himself, the British Prime Minister, where he said that a vote to live is the gamble of the century, and it will be our children's futures on the table if we were to roll the dice. So this is the references that we use, and that's all from us.
Thank
you.
you.